last couple of years or so, we've seen a shift. And we've noticed that for most companies, we're seeing increased activity at the drive-thru. Some of it's pandemic-driven. I think some of it's cultural-driven. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the changes you've seen in fraud and theft in the industry?
I mean, most of these restaurants closed during COVID. Their front counters closed their lobbies completely. So we saw, an increase in opportunity for theft there. But we also did see a lot of other false positives where the line voids to zero, we kind of knew what we were looking for originally when COVID happened. All of a sudden there were that many more because there were that many more people there. So we had to adapt what we were doing a little bit to narrow in back on, hey, what is the theft, while getting rid of some of those false positives.
Did you find that there were, when you had to refocus, that there were different types of theft? Or were they sticking with the same tried and true theft behaviors that were occurring, prior to the pandemic?
Yeah, I think they were sticking with it. I mean, at the end of the day, and you know this as well as I do, it's how are they going to get the cash into their pocket? Right. But I do think we had to refocus on, dollar amounts, whereas before we could lower dollar amounts, and again, we would have a normal amount of results, whereas with COVID, all of a sudden those results just exponentially increased, and paralysis by analysis kicks in, and all of a sudden you start trying to find it, but you just get deeper and deeper into the woods without actually being able to find it. So we had to adjust those. How are we going to find it? Increase those dollar amounts. Look at the transactions that we know that they're going to steal at. Ones that are running long because they don't want to have the void happen when they're collecting the cash, because anyone with an LP experience knows, hey, there's something going on here. So they collect the cash, and then an hour down the line, if they're the manager, they void it, or if it's the employee, they call over their manager and say, hey, this was a drive-off.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there different styles or types of fraud that you're seeing in the drive-thrus?
Yeah, definitely. When we're training people, when I talk to clients, I like to kind of compare theft to an onion. So we have kind of this top layer where the most egregious theft happens. And these are the people who are going to be stealing from you, and they're not worried about the consequences. They tend to steal large amounts at one time or throughout the day. They also do tend to get caught quicker because of that. Then kind of that next layer of theft are the people who are still stealing large amounts, but they're not going to be doing it 3 or 4 times a day. Maybe it's once a day, once a week. That way they tend to kind of blend in a little bit more to legitimate voids or discounts, things like that. And then that final layer is going to be what I like to call the slow bleeders. Those are the people who are going to be nickel and diming it. So they might steal $1 here, $2 here. And those people, they're not stealing as much at once, but because it's such a low dollar amount, they can steal a lot of times throughout the day without getting caught. And actually over the course of time that they're stealing, they tend to actually steal more sometimes than the people that are egregiously stealing that real top layer.
So for the egregious stealers, right, why are they so egregious? What's emboldening them to be so aggressive in their theft that they don't either care that they get caught or don't understand that they're going to get caught? What's driving that?
It really comes down to this actual need for money or perceived need for money. For one story that I have that really stuck out to me when we caught it, because I was actually just surprised about it, was we had this lady. She opened up the till using a low dollar sale, took a $20 bill out of the register, which was unusual. There's a customer there. She hands the money over to the customer, and the customer hands her back what appeared to be, unfortunately, an illicit substance. And I mean, that perceived need of money is typically for one of the main causes is addiction. Rarely, though, do we see it where the money and the addiction are literally both there in the video at the same time.
Right, which reminds me, of some other cases we've seen where, in fact, it wasn't the employee buying drugs through the drive-thru, it was the employee selling drugs through the drive-thru. So, their customers can come through and get a cold beverage, a snack, and the narcotic of choice, all through the convenience of the drive-thru window. And, the risk there obviously isn't so much that the owner operator or restaurant company is going to lose dollars in that regard, but the risk to their brand and to their company in terms of reputation, could take an unbelievable hit. That's the kind of stuff that shows up on the local news. Yeah. And unfortunately, and it's not something that any owner operator really wants to have or wants to deal with.
No, absolutely. And that, as well as I do, that hit to the brand is a lot in dollar terms. Oh. That's going to be way bigger than what that person's going to be stealing from you.
Oh, absolutely. And the time to get that trust back from the community takes a long time.
It does, if you even get it. I mean,
if you even get it.
How many times has that restaurant shut down permanently?
Absolutely. It's a problem. What are just a couple of key things that restaurant operators can put in place to help reduce that or help control that or help mitigate that risk?
Yeah. Take away opportunities. That's the biggest one. Take away the keys. Now, sometimes keys are essential because a register breaks, but put into place a strong policy about who maintains those keys, not any employee. Make sure it's a manager. You can even have it to where, hey, we have the key, it's in the safe. The only time you access that key, though, is if the register can't open on its own and you need to open it manually.
I concur with that wholeheartedly. I'm a huge fan of restricting key access, as you know, to quite frankly only the manager in charge, and even then it shouldn't be in their possession. Too easy to steal without traceable data. Yeah. What are some other things that might be a good control?
Other good controls are going to be making sure that things actually go through the register. A lot of times when it's one person's wearing the headset at the register, the other person in the kitchen's wearing it too, and they're anticipating those orders. And it's just as easy. They know what the order is. It's a 8-piece combo. It's a double Whopper, whatever it is.
Right.
And they just start making it without thinking about it because they think that it's going to come through on the kitchen.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't. So making sure that the person who's making the order sees it also pop up on either on their preview screen or having that kitchen chit print is super important.
What do you think when you see the cashier who's not handing the customer the receipt? Whether they're letting it pile up on the receipt printer or they're crumbling it up and throwing it away and you have a trash can full of receipts. What does that say to you?
That says you better start digging into that site because there's a good chance that something's happening there. When they're not giving out the receipts to customers, now sometimes it's just a simple operational thing and it's someone who was trained probably by a previously bad manager to, hey, ask them if they want their receipt. If they don't give it to them. But when they don't give them the receipt, that just opens up opportunities again. And what we're trying to do is eliminate those opportunities. So when you give that receipt to the customer, it means that manager can't do a fraudulent refund, because what we'll see is those managers will take that receipt at the end of the night and ring it up as a refund, and all of a sudden there's a legitimate cash transaction associated to it. The other thing is when the customer gets it, if the customer sees a discount or they see that it's voided down to a biscuit or a side of sauce, as a customer you're going to go to the cashier and say, hey, I was charged 11 cents, not $32 like you told me. So it's definitely one of those areas that immediately when I see it, I start digging in and saying, why aren't those receipts going to customers?
Absolutely. Another thing that with handing receipts to customers that's important, for those of us who do travel and those of us who travel for work, right, we're often required to bring those receipts back for our expense reports. And if you're not given the receipt, all of a sudden you're eating the cost of that meal and unable to expense it in many cases. So it's just good customer service to make sure that customers are always getting the receipt. And again, it helps ensure that what they're being charged is the appropriate amount.
Absolutely. Plus now with all of the rewards that some of these companies are doing, and you have to have your receipt or the surveys at the bottom that you can get your free meal with. I mean, customers are losing out. You're losing out on a loyalty from that customer as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so right now we're in an unusual time, right? The restaurants are struggling to bring in and retain people, right? To be fully staffed, which in itself is causing some issues. So with the labor issues where they're at in the restaurants struggling, how are they supposed to deal with people who are stealing when they can barely find replacements for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as, and we see this a lot, that people feel like they can't actually fire anyone. They say, I barely have 2 people to keep in the store at a time. I literally can't afford to lose anyone. Well, that's okay. But, let's say Joe was stealing and he's working with Jane. Well, if Joe was at the register and Jane's cooking the food, throw Jane on the register and make Joe cook the food. Take him off the register, get the cash away from him, eliminate the risk right then and there. And then when labor does become a little bit easier and you're actually able to hire people, that's when you can also reevaluate Joe's position in the company. Do you need to keep Joe there, or do you unfortunately send Joe out the door?
Absolutely. I think another thing it does too is it gives you an indication for when the labor market does turn around. It gives you an indication that Joe may not be your next shift leader or team lead or assistant manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Joe's ability to climb the company ladder may be limited based on current and past behavior. So don't you think there's a risk that if you don't do something with Joe, that Jane's going to see eventually what Joe's doing?
Yeah.
And it's going to incent Jane to take advantage of the company in maybe not the same ways, but in similar ways?
Yeah, or even make Jane apathetic. She says, why do I need to work hard if Joe's stealing from this company? I'll collect my paycheck and be done with it. And the effort that Jane might have already been putting in, or her aspirations with the company, just went out the window, and you lose a good employee because of a bad one.
Right. It's well known that people like themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a good, honest, hardworking employee often does not want to work with a known thief.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, you're still down a person, you're just down the wrong person.
Yeah.
All right, so you talk with our clients on a regular basis. What are some of the excuses that are being given for inappropriate, fraudulent behavior on behalf of the employees?
So one of the popular excuses that our clients hear from employees when they underring or they refund is, I was covering a safe shortage, or I was covering a till shortage. And unfortunately, sometimes the investigation from our clients stop there. They'll reprimand the person, but they're actually not stealing. But you and I both know there's actually a way bigger issue at hand here, and that's there's a safe shortage. Someone else is stealing from the store, and they're probably doing it in one of the most egregious fashions. Now, when you're underringing or you're refunding, you're covering your trail up so that it's harder to detect. Now, when you have a safe shortage or that till shortage, they don't care about covering it up. They're just stealing it straight up. So again, we're talking about this really egregious offender, that top layer of the onion again.
It's generally the innocent person or an innocent person that's just trying to make end of day balance. Mm-hmm. And in fact, what they're really doing in the long term is they're covering up a theft problem. And every time they do this, they're just incentivizing this aggressive individual to continue to steal.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, like you mentioned refunds, and you're giving district managers, area coaches the belief that there's a lot of refunds here because this store isn't able to deliver on the product and the services they should, when in fact the refund's not a legitimate customer refund, it's just hiding a loss. And at that point, it makes it very difficult for the upper layers of management to even take action because they don't know about what the actual issue is. It's theft, not a customer service issue.
Mm-hmm. And it becomes even more confusing because if there's enough of those refunds, a district manager, area coach, whatever you call them at that location, or for your brand, they're going to go into the store because they think they have horrible food, horrible customer service, something like that. And they're going to start watching everything happen, and they're going to say, why do we have all these refunds going on?
Right, and they're going to spend their effort in the wrong area. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.